Welcome to the Elevate Your Brand podcast, where we help online coaches learn how to elevate their brand, become the experts in their industries so they can bring in more clients and create a life they want. I am your host, Chris Anderson. And if you want to make a difference in the lives of others, share this episode, go over to Apple Podcasts and follow us there to leave a positive rating and review. And together we can leave a bigger positive mark on the world. Hello. Welcome back to Elevate Your Brand. I'm Chris Anderson, your host, and looking forward to today's episode. And it's a little bit different. We talked to a lot of financial coaches, business coaches, things of that nature, successful entrepreneurs. And this one's no different, just in a different field that we haven't really talked a whole lot in. So the world of wine. And I'm excited for that. My wife and I like wine. So today's guest, he is the best-selling author of Drinking and Knowing Things. He's a certified sommelier with the Guild of Master Sommeliers. He's a certified wine specialist and a Master of Wine candidate with the Institute of Masters of Wine. So he runs a widely popular Drinking and Knowing Things wine blog, which has adapted into multiple books that provides a lot of different wine recommendations. And he is also the founder of, and I hope I pronounced this right, Bhutan Wine Company, and is leading the development of the wine industry in the magical area of the Himalayan country. And on top of that, he owns an award-winning SoCal rum company. So if you're looking for where the rum went, Johnny, there it is. And it was actually recently awarded the highest point score in history for any silver rum. So super excited to have Michael Juergens on the show today. He does a whole lot of other things, and you'll have to check out what he does. But his long list of accolades could take the whole episode. So we'll stop there. And Michael, MJ, welcome to the show.
What's up, Chris? Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to have you on here. We were just chatting a little bit before hit record of just travels and future plans and ideas and all that. And so it's cool to kind of get in your mind a little bit, and excited for you to share more with the audience. So I guess first, just real quick, if you would, just high level, like what got you into all the wine industry, rum industry, and what are you working on right now?
So when I was about 22, my dad had been on a business trip to Italy. And while he was there as a present, somebody had given him this old bottle of Italian wine, and he brought it home. And he doesn't know anything about wine. I didn't know anything about wine. He goes, "I got this bottle of wine, Mike, let's drink it." And I go, "I don't drink wine, Dad. Like, I'm a punk rock skateboard kid, I'm drinking Mexican beer and tequila shots, I could care less about wine. Wine's for sissies." And so, but he talked me into drinking it. We poured it into red Solo cups, and we sat in the garage, drinking this Gattinara from 1975, which I remember everything about this moment, by the way. And like that kind of flipped a switch on in my brain that said, "Oh, I can see why people care about wine." Like, I didn't know about it, but it was sort of like an enlightening moment. And I think that there are certain things that our brains are sort of neurologically wired to do, like running, for example. We ran down prey for 50,000 years. Like, in our brains, there's something that says you should go for a long run. And occasionally, that switch flips, and then next thing you know, you're a marathon runner. You're spending all your time going out. Wine is one of those. It's been around for so many thousands of years that was what flipped my switch on. And then, just kind of continued to explore that for a number of years, and then got serious about it probably about when I was maybe 40.
Okay.
I said, you know what, this is interesting enough to spend a lifetime doing. So
that's awesome. And that's crazy too. At 40, you said basically kind of started that wine journey. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
Yeah. I mean, I dabbled.
Yeah.
for a number of years. And then at around 40, I was like, you know what, I'm going to get serious about this. And I did.
Awesome. And that's so cool. And that just shows, like, it doesn't matter, what age. You don't have to be 16 to become successful in something. And really, I mean, just with your accolades, like starting at 40, taking it serious, and you're able to succeed and do and be doing what you're doing it's cool. So at any time you can decide to really get serious about something and make it happen, which I think is really awesome.
But you know what? I totally agree with that, by the way. And you look at like Grandma Moses, who started painting when she was, 1 billion years old or whatever it was.
Right.
But I think more important than that, like for me, I came up, I'm a partner at a global consulting firm, and coming up, there's this sort of chasing of stuff and chasing of status and chasing of the next level. And that becomes, particularly in the corporate world, that becomes kind of how you live. And I made a conscious decision probably about 13 or 14 years ago to stop chasing stuff and only do these are my words, by the way.
Yeah.
This is my mantra that I came up with. I only want to do epic shit with cool people.
Nice.
And so like, if it's not that, like, that's my litmus test. If it's not that, I'm not doing it. And so when I dove into the wine thing head first, it wasn't because I thought it was going to make me a billionaire or lead me all these places. It was truly because it was epic shit with cool people, and I got to travel the world and do all this crazy stuff. And through that, also I was successful. And I think that we can all sort of benefit a little bit from that. If you're doing something for the right reasons, success is a lot easier to find.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. It's like the whole thing with Elevate, helping people with video podcast production. Like, we're a part of someone else's ability to impact people. Yeah. And it's cool to be kind of in the background, helping them push themselves higher to then reach more people to make a more positive impact. And so, I think that goes without saying, kind of, is just, the passion is there, the right reasons to doing things. And sticking to that, I think, is a big thing you said as well, because we can get caught up in, more money or more things. And then we kind of lose sight of the reason we started the endeavors to begin with.
Well, and the bar moves too, right?
Yep,
so you make $1 billion in Bitcoin, but the dude next to you made $2 billion in Bitcoin, and so now you're a failure because you only made $1 billion. Like,
right?
The arbitrariness of how you measure success, will impact your state of mind. And if for me, I'm like, was it epic? Was it with cool people?
Right. Yeah.
Success,
Yeah.
And with that, I've done some stuff that, was epic and was with cool people, but wasn't necessarily fun.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah.
Like, I ran a marathon at the South Pole and I almost died.
Oh, wow.
And coming out of it was a pretty profound experience, but I'll tell you what, during it, I wasn't having a lot of fun.
No. Yeah. That's crazy. The North Pole.
South Pole. Sorry. Yeah.
South Pole. Jeez. I mean, I've run marathons. I can't imagine doing it at the South Pole.
Negative 30 degrees, 50-mile-an-hour winds, blizzard. Like, I got lost on a glacier.
Oh, no.
Awful. But I finished, but barely. And so would I hold that up as, oh, look at this success? I don't know that it was but it was profound, and it was like this experience that I'll treasure the rest of my life, right? So, like, if I was measuring it by a certain arbitrary time, I would have called it a failure.
Right.
But I wasn't measuring it by that. I was measuring it by, did you have this epic experience with some cool people? And I did.
Yeah. And I think, how we measure the success matters, like you're saying. And I think that's a great thing to remember, especially early on in entrepreneur, like, because there's so much ups and downs and quote unquote failures and learning lessons, which, I mean, that's all failure is just a learning lesson. But it can, I mean, if you don't have the right metric, you end up comparing yourself to other people, which it just brings you down. So having that good litmus test of what you're doing, like, did I do something to help someone else today? Like, did my content provide value, instead of like, how much money did I make, or, all that. So I think that's a huge thing to remember, especially early on in our journeys. And I'm sure, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think, there's another analogy from that race that kind of, to me, epitomizes the entrepreneurial journey, which is, around about mile 13, my goggles froze over and I couldn't see, but they told us, don't take your goggles off because you'll go snowblind. And I was running in this little trench, and on either side there were the snow was banked up a little bit higher, but I couldn't see. But I knew as long as I stayed in the trench, I was okay. So what I started to do is I was just running blind, and I would run until I got outside of the trench, and I would hit the snowbank and I would fall down. Then I would pick myself up and I would reorient, and I would run again blind until I hit something, and then I would fall down. And I did this for about 3 or 4 miles. Jeez. And to the point where the people behind me thought I was having like seizures or something. And they reported me to the medics. Like, we think something's wrong with this guy. But to me, that almost feels like certain entrepreneurial journeys, certainly like what I'm trying to do in the Himalayas. It's you're running blind and you're making progress, but then you hit something, you fall down, you pick yourself up and you reorient and you start running again. And guess what? You're going to hit something else. You're going to fall down. And the key is pick yourself up, reorient, and keep going.
Oh, 100%.
That's
such a good
entrepreneurialism in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's such a good, picture and visualization of entrepreneurship for sure. Yeah. Getting back up after, knocking yourself down because you don't know where in the world you're going and you're trying to figure it out.
Just keep charging ahead. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's probably going to hurt.
Right.
Let's go.
Exactly. And, right there, you mentioned, what you're doing in the Himalayas. Tell us a little bit about that. And I'd love to hear kind of how that journey is going and things that you've overcome already with that.
Yeah, so the Kingdom of Bhutan is a small mountain kingdom. It's tucked in between Tibet and Nepal in the Himalayas. And they are sort of widely regarded as one of the best places on earth for sustainable agriculture. They're the only carbon negative country on the planet. And what they do is very sort of harmonious with the environment. And they grow some of the world's best crops there in odd verticals like red rice or cardamom or the best stuff comes from Bhutan. Anyway, so I had been there. I went there actually to run a marathon in the Himalayas.
Nice.
And while I was there, I just assumed because they grow all this great stuff that they grew grapes, wine grapes. And so I was asking everybody, hey, I'd want to see the vineyards before I leave because I'm a wine geek. And I think you guys probably are doing some really awesome stuff. And it turned out they didn't have any. For whatever reason, grapes didn't grow there organically like they did in many other regions. And when the Roman army or Marco Polo marched around the world, they never went to Bhutan. So they never brought grapes there. So once I found out that they didn't have this, I basically kind of lit the country up a little bit like, hey, you guys are screwing up. You should totally do this. You're wasting this magnificent natural resource that you've been granted. You should do something with this. And I believed it. I was passionate. Yeah. I didn't set out to do it myself. I just thought they should do it because it would be cool. And so that led to, a couple of years worth of conversations about what I thought they ought to do. And inevitably they concluded, we want to do this. And then they asked me if I would help them. And I was like, are you kidding? Epic shit with cool people, right? Like, how much more epic in the wine space is that? Like, you get to invent an entire country's wine industry from scratch and figure out, are we going to do sparkling wine or sweet wine or red wines or white wines or what?
Right.
What bottle sizes do we use and what blends and what are the rules?
Wow.
So that's kind of how I got involved in it. And it's been great. We'll do our first harvest next year.
Oh, wow. Cool. So how long does that take to be able to, from start to harvest, I guess?
It takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years for a vineyard to come out.
Wow. Okay.
So I have 6 vineyards that are 5 years old, and I have 2 vineyards that are 3 years old.
Okay.
And so they're about ready. We probably could have made some wine this year, but there was still some pandemic pressures and stuff on travel. And so I just said, we'll do it next year. The other thing is, I think the last time that a country that had never made wine, like invented a wine industry and made wine for the very first time, the last time that happened was in New Zealand in like the mid 1800s. Like this has not happened in a while. And it's a pretty historic thing, both for the country and for the global wine industry. Yeah. So I wanted to also do it right. I didn't want to try to rush it. So could have done it this year. We're going to do it next year.
Awesome.
Make a documentary about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, that's going to say, how are you marketing that, this whole launch of a new wine in a new country's wine? Like what are your plans with that? How are you getting it out there?
talking to guys like you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Actually, I've been doing interviews around the world for actually a couple of years now on the topic, because there's a lot of people are interested in just, is this possible? This hasn't been done in 200 years. Like, wow.
Yeah.
How do we do this? And so, have had a lot of support from the global wine community. That's certainly awesome. My day job, running the global wine consulting practice for a large company. I have a lot of global contacts and That's stuff, cool. But we think it's going to be, here's what I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how the wine's going to taste.
That's true. You won't, you want it now until after you make it, I guess.
Until after you make it. So like the last 7 or 8 years, we've been basing all of this on the Mike Juergens theory that Bhutan can produce great wine, but that's an open question still that we're going to solve, and we'll find out next year. And
so with that, are you guys focusing on a certain, I know you said it could have been all sorts of sparkling, whatever. Did you land on a certain type of wine?
We're trying to figure that out. So like Bhutan, the low end of the country is about 500 feet in altitude.
Okay.
And the north side of the country is like 27,000 feet in altitude.
Okay.
And that distance is only like 400 miles.
Wow.
So there's a whole bunch of different climate zones from jungle up to glacier, in the country. And so what we did was we planted a bunch of different stuff at a bunch of different altitudes with the intent that probably 70% of it's not going to work.
Okay.
And which is fine. I am trying to figure out what does work. And so like matter of fact, I was talking on Sunday to one of our vineyard managers, and it looks like at that particular vineyard, we're going to go all in on Malbec and Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
Those two grapes are growing really, really well there. And there's some other grapes like Chardonnay that we have planted there that aren't growing at all.
Wow.
Which is fine. Okay. So let's get rid of the Chardonnay. We'll double down on Malbec, and cool. And I anticipate that, over the next 50 years, the country will continue to really sort of dial in what works perfectly well where, and I'll be dead, but this is a long-term play for the country.
That's really cool. And I'm sure I'm sure you've had a lot of obstacles like on this entrepreneurial journey just in itself that you've had to overcome.
You can't even begin to imagine.
I mean, you're bringing wine to a whole country that's never done it there. So like, what have been some of the big obstacles, and how'd you overcome them?
Well, so you certainly have the obstacles of trying to get a country committed to a vision. So there was a whole bunch of stuff on the front end of me explaining like why wine's important, why people care about wine, why it's great for a country to create a high value export product that goes out to the world with the name of where it came from on the bottle. And then people interact with, you put it in your body. Like that's you're interacting with that product like pretty intimately.
Yeah.
And so, there was the front end piece, the strategy piece, the tactics of doing things like trying to get foreign species into a country without screwing up the existing species in the country.
Yeah.
And managing that. We have interesting pests and diseases, which are new. We have monkeys. Not a lot of monkey problems in Napa or matter of fact. So I get standing updates every morning from all of our vineyards. And then we have a weekly call with everybody. And so on this week's call on Sunday, we were running through the different vineyards, and they're like, okay, we got this problem in this one vineyard. And I go, okay, what's the problem? And they're like, we now have bears.
Oh, geez.
And so the bears figured out, there's some grapes growing over here, and we like grapes. And so now I have to solve for the bear problem at one of our vineyards.
Wow.
And I'm doing all this obviously from the other side of the world, so there's a geography and a time zone issue. And
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
So how do you balance all that? How do you stay on it all?
So the good news is we have a really great team in the country. So we have about 100 people there. And that I have a French guy who is our vineyard operations leader who really kind of knows grapes. And then I have our chief operating officer over there is a Bhutanese person who really knows how to get stuff done in the country.
Cool.
And so, the combination of those two allows me a lot of leverage. Like their goal is solve for this stuff, bring me the problems that they can't solve for locally, and then we'll figure out how to do that as a team. So without them, there's no way this could be done. It's impossible.
And that's, a lot of, there's a lot of solopreneurs out there still starting out. And so don't get discouraged if you don't have a team. But once you're able to get that point, and even if it's someone who sees your vision and is volunteering to help you, like the right people make such a big difference in accomplishing your goals. Even if it's just, if you have someone who is of the same mindset, who's going towards their goals, and you guys just network to support one another, that can even be a huge teammate to have just in the beginning stages, because you guys can support and just encourage one another until you can get to the point where you have, the people on your team actually doing different parts of the job and of the business. So it can be done at any level. It looks different at the level you're at, but I think, we can only go so far by ourselves. We go a lot farther with other people.
Well, and I think for us, the key to making that happen was to really communicate the vision in a way that people can get their hands around. And this whole idea of we're going to do something that hasn't been done in 200 years. And we think it's going to be really bitching because it's Bhutan,
right.
And I have people, to your point, from a networking perspective, I have people that are absolutely willing to help me. Like the monkey thing. Here's a perfect example. I was reaching out around the globe to say who's solving the monkey problem. And I got this winery in South Africa where the owner reached out to me, had somehow heard through the grapevine that reached out and said, okay, we have baboons in our vineyard. Here's exactly how we solve for them. Here's our protocols. Now it turns out their protocols were shoot the baboons with paintball guns. So I don't know that we'll deploy that particular monkey management protocol. But to your point, that person had no skin in the game other than these guys are doing something really, really cool, and I want to help them.
Yeah.
But we got there by being able to communicate this vision globally in a way that was interesting and people want to help.
Yeah, that's really neat because, no matter what you're doing, there's so many people and there's so much room in markets. People might say it's saturated or you think it's saturated, but there's so much room for everybody kind of to play in the sandbox and like that, just that example of them reaching out to help, not seeking anything. Cause you have the people of the mindset who'd be like, oh, I hope the monkeys eat all their grapes, so we don't have to worry about it. But that wasn't the case, which is a really cool thing. Have you had any negative kind of, and you don't have to mention names, but anything that's kind of someone tried to hinder your plans with this? I'm just curious.
I don't know that I've had any people that have sort of really been negative about it or tried to hinder. Mm-hmm. I have had skepticism.
Okay. Yeah.
And so particularly around things like, dude, it's the Himalayas. And when you think about the Himalayas in your head, you probably think of, Yeti and glaciers and snowmen and
salt.
Salt. And you don't necessarily get a vision of Napa Valley and these large, terraces with vines and stuff. And so, and there's some merit to that. I think the nuances of the way that the country is laid out, altitude wise, part of it does look like that, but part of it doesn't. And if you haven't been there, you don't know. And so it's easy for you to sit there and say, well, this will never work. And here's why. And I'm like, well, have you been to Bhutan? And they're like, no. Like, you look at any pictures of Bhutan? No. You done any studying on it? No. Okay, so you're just sitting on the sidelines throwing rocks. Okay, cool. Like,
Right.
go ahead. But while you're throwing rocks, I'm going to be planting more Merlot over here and trying to make some shit happen.
Right. Absolutely. It's like the quote I've heard, if you won't go to them for advice, then don't take their criticism to heart. Like if they're not someone you'd listen to, then just, it's whatever. It's like, okay, you just don't understand. It's cool. And kind of move on.
Yeah. They're making noise and cool.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, I think people have been, just because it's a cool concept and vision and idea. And it also it's not really biting into anybody else's market share. Like there's nobody doing this in the Himalayas. So if I do it, like, it doesn't threaten Robert Mondavi in Napa, that I'm doing at all. And they're like, this is really neat. Let's see what could happen.
That is cool. That is, I think it's awesome to, you're starting from scratch in a whole nother country. So that's really a neat, and I'm excited to see them in the stores. Do you plan on putting them in big box stores right away, or is it, how's that work?
What I believe is that I believe if we do this right, and we can really capture the essence of Bhutan, the wines are going to be really high quality. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be $150 to $250 bottle, and quantities will be limited. So we'll probably do sort of more allocation basis to higher end restaurants and small specialty retailers. Probably won't hit the big box guys. If at some point we get the volumes that we can, great. Yeah. My guess is that's probably not going to happen for at least a decade.
Gotcha. But that's cool. It's still a neat process and getting it out there. And so, with that, if you could go back, 30 years, what would you tell your younger self, to maybe not specific about wine, but just in general to help your journey?
I think this whole mindset shift of stop chasing stuff and start chasing epic shit with cool people. To me, that was really the inflection point where I was able to elevate my life in every single way possible. So I might tell myself that earlier. That being said, I don't know that I was ready to hear it when I was in my 20s.
Good point.
And so I think I had to go through what I went through in the journey to get my head to the point where I could even accept this idea.
Yeah.
And I believe the universe kind of takes us on the path that we're supposed to go on. And so I think that for me, that's what I needed to do to get to this point.
Yeah.
I remember 23-year-old Mike. That kid was an asshole. He had a lot of ego going on. Wasn't a good listener, and doing his, I'm going to do my own thing, and well, turns out your own thing, you run in and fall down a lot.
Yeah, so. I think that's a huge point because, we think, if I could go back, I'd tell myself, just get started right away. But I think, like, to your point, if we would have started right away, like if we were able to go back and tell ourselves that, I don't know how it would turn out because our journey is such a part of where we are now. Like, I think of mine, like, I say this, I talk to people, I'm like, I tell myself, don't go to college, just start a business right away. But it's like, going to college was a huge part of my story, helping me overcome a lot of mental and spiritual and emotional things. And then I'm like, but the debt wasn't worth it. And I was like, but it's teaching me to be better with finances, and it'll help me show other people the different options, that it doesn't have to be just college. So like my journey, like if I wouldn't have, would look different now and maybe not as successful as it could have been, or if I wouldn't have went there. So I think that's a great point to remember. Like the journey is, the biggest part of how we got to where we are right now, not to forget that, even though sometimes it's not the best, it's still gotten us where we are.
Totally. And the analogy that I sometimes use is the whitewater kayaking analogy, which is like, life is moving.
Yeah.
You're not going to stop, time and the universe going where it's going to go. And you can get your kayak and you can get in the middle and you can try to steer a little bit and paddle a little bit, but if you fight it, you can't paddle upstream. If you try to fight it too much, you're going to get slammed into the rocks. Your best bet is to just take the ride, let it go where you're supposed to, let it take you where you're supposed to go. Mm-hmm. Try to steer around the big obstacles and take as few lumps as humanly possible. But the second you think you're controlling anything, you're high. You're not the world. You do not control the world.
So true, and that's a good analogy too, because I've been whitewater rafting once, and you go through the rapid, then it seems like it goes forever, but then it's so short, and then you have some moments of calm, and you can kind of recollect your senses and get ready, and then here comes the next rapids, and so it's kind of like life. You have those moments, and as you continue to go down. So I think that's a great analogy and a good one to kind of wrap things up. Where can people connect with you more to stay in touch with what you're doing over in Bhutan and everything you've got going on? I'd love to have that out there for people.
Yeah. So if you go to drinkingandknowingthings.com, you can certainly sign up for my wine newsletter. You can, it has links to all the books that I've written, a little bit about me. You can contact me through there. You can go to bhutanwine.com, which is the site that's specifically for the Bhutanese wine project, or follow us on Instagram, Bhutan Wine, and SoCal Rum, SoCalRum.com and at SoCal Rum. Like we're not very creative marketers, but we're easy to find.
Sure.
And if people are at all interested in any of the stuff, happy to always respond to emails or direct messages or whatever. Awesome. I think we're doing some cool stuff, and we're having a good time.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys get connected, check out what they're doing, and just follow that journey. I think it's an exciting thing, what you guys are doing, MJ, and I'm excited to continue to watch that. And thank you so much for being on the show and now having this connection together. I look forward to everything. So.
No, thanks for having me on and giving me a shot to chat about stuff I like talking about. So
absolutely. Yeah. And if you guys found this interesting, you took those golden nuggets away, make sure you like and subscribe, and send this to somebody who might be, going through something or having ideas to start something and are on the fence, because together we can reach more people and we can make a better difference together instead of singularly. So, but until next time, guys, go out there and continue to elevate. And thanks so much for tuning into this episode today. If you found value at all from this episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It just helps us get this show, these messages out in front of more people. And don't forget to share this with someone who you think could benefit from listening to as well.